What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Walkout Network. You're watching another edition of Unleashed, the weekly panel discussion show. And as always, I'm very happy to present to you a fine panel. So we'll start with the special guest because the lineup has changed just a bit this week. So we're going to start off first with the man who is at the helm of MMA On Point, perhaps your favorite MMA YouTube channel for a variety of reasons. He is Jason Hartley, the co-owner of MMA On Point. Jason, how are you feeling, my man?
Feeling pretty good. The beginning of a really big week, so a lot of stuff going on, and feeling a bit of trepidation. I'll just say that. Not a lot of sleep is going to be had.
Yeah, sleep is a foreign concept to me at this point, and
it's wrong.
I for what I'm being told, I'll have it'll be at least 6 to 8 months before I get a good night's rest for the baby coming up. But man, oh, sleep, I miss it. Jay, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you because I need to give Pat a better intro since I screwed up his outro last time. But so definitely want to introduce Jay Petrie. He is the statistician. He is the mathematical genius, the man with all the numbers and figures. Jay Petrie, what's going on, bro?
You know, I'm excited, ready to talk about this stuff. Mr. Duffy's off on assignment, we'll say. So we're going to keep on rolling in his honor, I suppose. For my stat of the week, first of all, my stat of the week got all messed up because Kimbo Slice's son, Kevin Ferguson, had his win overturned to a no contest because he threw some illegal elbows. So my new stat of the week, just a couple right on the Mohawk line. So my new stat of the week is 27%. 27%. It's the stoppage rate at the most recent one championship event, one Dawn of Valor last weekend. It's the lowest stoppage rate they've ever had for any card. No card has ever had a finish rate below 40%. So that happened.
Well, I'm sure it was a lot of honor there as well. So we've got a fourth man on the panel. You've seen him before. He is the business mind to Sherdog.com, business mind for the Body Lock MMA as well. He is all day. Pat, OJ. Pat, what's going on, bro?
Not much, man. Just chilling, working hard, hardly working, all those phrases you say.
So, and what are you drinking there, sir?
Just some diet soda, sure.
Oh, okay. I'm drinking some whiskey flavored soda. So
there's a little bit in there.
Little something for the adults. Oh, and happy belated birthday as well. So I hope you enjoyed your celebration.
My birthday?
Yeah.
No, man, that's man.
Wait, was it next week or is it? I thought it was last weekend.
No. We were talking about the Moscow card, man.
We were just talking about it on Slack.
Yeah, because we were talking about the Moscow card.
Oh, so I was all hyped about your birthday for nothing?
Yeah, man. It's like 2 weeks off.
Man,
you turned 18 once, though. I'm excited, too, so it's all right.
I'm very excited.
No, he ain't 18, man. We're not promoting underage drinking on this channel, okay?
Well, it's just soda in there.
We are law-abiding citizens, okay? So before we go really, really off the rails, because we're already off to a tremendous start, let's go ahead and get to some mixed martial arts discussion. So I'm going to start this off. I'll kick it to you first, Jason. Swing or miss, Ben Askren will retire after his submission loss to Damian Maia.
Yeah, I watched the interview today with Ariel, and I found it to be pretty... I don't know. I mean, I don't think it was anything crazy for him to say he might retire, but I did kind of see it inside of him that he probably wants to do one more fight. He left the door a little too open. MMA, everybody's notoriously going to walk right through that door, even if there's a little bit of creak, even if the door is slammed shut, like with a Chuck Liddell or something like that, or a BJ Penn these days. And I think he's probably going to do one more fight. And depending on how that goes, that will for sure determine he's in the UFC or not. And then, of course, that will, from then on, determine whether or not he wants to continue on with his career. I suspect if he loses one more, he will retire. If he manages to eke out some kind of win, it's probably going to have to be a lot lower down in the division. I think it's hard to put him in the top 10 at this point. So I think it's going to be one of these kind of things where he'll probably try one more fight. And we'll see how that goes. And usually it doesn't go well when people are kind of half in, half out. So we'll see.
Yeah,
one more fight, though. That's what I say.
Yeah, it's kind of sticky situation. I haven't had a chance to watch the Ariel Helwani interview just yet because I am just leaving my day job. But fellas, any more insight into this? Do you think Ben Askren is going to hang it up after his loss to Damian Maia over the weekend?
Go ahead, Pat.
I don't think he will. After I initially watched that performance, I thought, okay, this might be it. It might be time, especially about some things he said. But then, just like Jason said, watching that interview, he leaves the door a little bit too open. I think he, especially talking about how he wanted to prove himself to be the best, covered that a lot, even in the post-fight interview. I think he's disappointed about how things went, but if he leaves on a loss and just hangs him up now, I think that will kind of eat at him, and he'll probably end up either coming out of retirement at some point or going, who knows, honestly, could go to another promotion, any of that stuff. But I think he tries for one more, and I think they set him up with a legend of sorts. Maybe if Matt Brown wins, maybe that wouldn't be a bad call. So someone that's not necessarily ranked, but enough of a name that if he takes the win, he could then go for the option to retire. Because I don't think he wants to keep going. I think he probably wants to end on a win. But that's my thought.
Yeah, I think one thing that's very important for us to remember is that when he came over to the UFC, he already had his mind on retirement. I think he was inactive for like a year and a half before any of this ever happened. So a guy who was very comfortable just chilling, like he was in camp helping Tyron Woodley, helping Anthony Pettis prepare for their fights, and really had his mind outside of the sport. Now, Pat, I do want to piggyback off of something that you just said about potential opponents, and also, Jason, something you said about them going lower in the division to find a suitable name for Ben Askren to fight. The name that comes to mind for me, ironically, is being more linked to the winner of that fight, and that's Diego Sanchez. So Jay, what do you think of that matchup?
I never would have even approached that one in my head. From the idea of giving him a big name to go out with a win, so it's kind of respectable. I can see it, but I don't even know if he's going to take another fight. I'm really not sure. It reminds me of when Rashad was talking about retirement. It was like the Fonz of the can't even say the word, and then Rashad started talking about retirement, and he was never there. And then you saw him fight fighters that he should have beaten and did not. Like Daniel Kelly, that fight did not go his way because he didn't really feel like, well, at least to us, he didn't seem like he wanted to fight anymore. His UFC tenure, Askren's, has been marred in controversy at the best case scenario. It's kind of messy with his Lawler situation. And then the Masvidal thing, and now the Maia thing. He talked himself into a real corner when he came into the UFC. And I'll counter your big name but not ranked with another suggestion. I think I've seen it floating around earlier. A Neil Magny type, because it's a respectable win over a veteran in the division who is on the fringe of the top 15 and may not pose as much of a danger, because if he does want to come back, he will want to get that win and go, okay, I did it. I'm out. Because what else do you do? Do you fight Gilbert Burns? Good luck with that. That dude wants to fight He wants to fight Francis Ngannou. Actually does. He said that because he's a crazy person. But considering it was title or bust for Askren, I just can't see a lot of matchups left for him right now.
Yeah, it doesn't really seem like there's a lot out there, at least as far as if we're looking at Ben Askren like a title challenger. I mean, he said it himself that he feels that he's a long way away from actually getting a shot at a UFC belt. And if you look at pretty much everyone in the top 15, those are tough nights for him regardless. Those are very, very tough nights for him. So you would have to kind of dig deep on the roster to find a guy who fits the bill from a competitive standpoint, and then also has the name appeal. I think a name like Neil Magny, I think he exceeds the watermark for talent and underperforms when it comes to the name. I mean, Neil Magny is a name that we respect, but doesn't really register much outside of our media bubble. But now one interesting wrinkle to this whole thing. I mean, ironically, this fight took place in Singapore. It was in the same arena that he has fought, I think, 4 times under one championship's banner as their welterweight / middleweight, whatever weight champion that he was. But
Rumbleweight.
Yeah, what hydration weight. So Demetrious Johnson, of course, former flyweight champion of the UFC, now Grand Prix winner and one championship. This trade took place about a year ago. I think it was a year to the date yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, that this trade was announced. I think so.
Something like that.
Yeah, I know I'm in the ballpark with this figure here. So now we have 3 fights for Ben Askren in the UFC. I think we've had 3 for Demetrious Johnson.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So now 3 fights apiece in their new promotional homes. How do you rate this trade?
You know, it's funny. It depends on whose perspective you're coming at it from. Because when you look at the UFC, they hit a home run with this situation. Because I mean, I've said it before on previous shows. I'll say it till the bitter end. The UFC failed promoting Demetrious Johnson in the flyweight division. How could people care about a champion that's fighting challengers that have never been featured on the main card? So Askren, you can kind of picture him as brought in from the outset as either he could go all the way if he has the talk, he can back it up, he can play like those other guys in the past that have talked their way through, and if he can win and go that, he has that route, or it's the brash outsider that comes in. He's the Bellator super duper champion. He's the one championship dominant force and gets smoked in the UFC. The UFC can go, ha ha, look at that. I mean, the way they matched him up against Robbie Lawler, a notorious brawler for his first fight, it was kind of telling. I mean, both promotions, if you think about it, actually won in the trade because one championship loves having Mighty Mouse too. But really, the UFC made money hand over foot for Askren. And here's why. This weekend's card says everything. It couldn't have happened without the flying knee that went into all flying knees. It's the best thing that happened for Jorge Masvidal too. But, you know, it worked out for everybody besides maybe Ben Askren.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that point, man. That was something I argued in my post-fight column, Good, Bad, and the Ugly, because, you know, everyone makes good out of this except for Ben Askren. I mean, aside from the paychecks that he cashed. So Jorge Masvidal was a journeyman that pretty much flew under the radar outside of a hardcore group of fans. Nate Diaz is a guy who's been struggling to have some relevance in the cage, at least, outside of Conor McGregor in the past several years. The UFC seemed like they didn't know what to do with Diaz, didn't know what to do with Masvidal, didn't know what to do with Demetrious Johnson. One championship needed a guy who had this worldwide reputation for being one of the best in the world. Oh, and on top of that, he's this hardcore gamer, and esports is a big part of their future plans. So everybody seems to make good out of this except for Ben Askren. So my question for you, Pat and Jay, are you, in hindsight now, do you like this trade? Do you like the fact that this take place, or would you like to see more of these sort of deals happen?
I guess from my point of view, yes, because everybody wins, I think. I would argue even Ben Askren wins, from the sense that he was kind of sitting on the shelf, like you guys said. He was happy in retirement, but if you go listen to that Joe Rogan podcast he did while in retirement, you could tell he wishes he had an opportunity to be there. He still thinks he's the best ever. He loves the fame. He loves, he's a talker. He loves the spotlight, and he got that with the UFC trade. And again, he gets a big paycheck. Does it hurt his legacy a little bit? Of course. I mean, now there's no more mystery behind, like, would this guy really have been that amazing had he come over? And you can still argue the whole prime versus past prime aspect. But honestly, I think he still gets a fair amount out of it. And yeah, just as Jay said, I mean, you're looking at the UFC making money hand over fist over Askren's talk, his knockout that gave Masvidal this main event spot at 244. This type of thing should definitely happen more often. I don't see why it doesn't, especially when you have a couple of other situations like this. And yeah, I mean, it's just, as you brought up, and I mean, Demetrious Johnson is perfect for one. The esports thing, especially because they're really trying to grow that, he's huge on esports. So I don't know why more organizations don't do this, but I mean, it's a UFC deal, so you know they don't like to play well with others for the most part. So that's part of it.
So Jason, I do want to throw something at you here because we alluded to it a little bit here, the matchmaking for Ben Askren. Now, I am of the mind that the UFC did him absolutely no favors with the people that they lined up in front of him. And I say that for this reason. When Ben Askren came over to the UFC, he popped shit at every single welterweight on the roster except for Robbie Lawler. They put him up with Robbie Lawler, who also happens to be stylistically the worst matchup you possibly could pair him with. Then, you know, of course, he was supposed to get Till, had Till gotten past Masvidal, but now you got Masvidal, who isn't much of a talker. I mean, he emerged a star from this, but it was because of the flying knee and not because he trash talked his way into it. And then, and then you go from that to fighting perhaps the nicest human being that's ever fought in mixed martial arts in Damian Maia. So Jason, in hindsight, do you wish the matchmaking for Ben Askren was a bit different during this UFC run?
No, not really. I think as a fan, it was the kind of, I know a lot of people complained about it. Actually, I'm thinking about Brendan Schaub. Brendan Schaub complained about it, and I'm just kind of, where he's kind of saying that's not really a highly rated type kind of critique coming
what
from
you got
Brendan
for
Schaub there. But I always kind of find it. Actually, if you don't mind me backtracking a tad here, I've always kind of seen this entire thing as kind of a bad deal from the get-go. Because, I mean, I'm watching as a fan. I don't care about lining anybody's pockets. I don't care about any of that stuff. Yes, I do want to see trades and all that, but I want to see Cejudo versus DJ3. I do want to see that. And when we talk about trades, you know, who knows? Once one collapses, inevitably, maybe that could happen. Hot take there. But what my kind of thought on this whole thing is, yeah, Ben Askren, he did have a hard road, but probably a lot like Darren Till, who you just mentioned, he probably also wanted the hardest road. He didn't necessarily want Robbie Lawler, but he was basically like, how can I get to the title as fast as possible? I did come out of retirement so that I could prove myself as the best in the world, who I believe I am. So I'm going to go up against the best that you've got. Dana, is that the best that you got? Apparently it's not the best yet. Found out real quick who the best were. And as controversial as that finish was, you know, that's a whole different story. But yeah, I think it was the right kind of play. I think what they did was they put him up against the toughest guys. He was 19-0, prove it. And as a fan, I think the fans really won out on getting to see him go up against the guys that he did. So I don't have a problem with it. He was 19-0 coming in, test that record, see what it's worth, and it got tested. It got broken.
Big time. Big time. Yeah. All right. So we'll move on from this subject real quick, and we're going to pivot to something very serious before we continue with more fight discussion. And I apologize for not opening the show with this because this is much more important than anything we have to talk about when it comes to people fighting each other for money. But UFC heavyweight Walt Harris' stepdaughter has been missing since Friday. Her name is Anaya Blanchard, and she was missing from the Auburn, Alabama area, if I'm not mistaken about the city. So you can check on our respective Twitter accounts. You can check any major mixed martial arts news outlet. You can check major news outlets, period. I'm looking at links from CNN and Fox News and pretty much every major news site for information. So if you see anything, you know anything, you heard anything, call the Auburn police, 334-501-3140. Again, that number is 334-501-3140. And we want to see this young lady return home safely. So let's make sure that message gets spread as loud as possible. All right, so back to the face punching. We did have, one of those people that would be mentioned in the conversations of people you'd like to see traded to get to the UFC. Douglas Lima, and he is $1 million richer. He's got 2 new belts to add to his collection, and he got revenge on Rory McDonald, winning the welterweight Grand Prix for Bellator this weekend. So now, I'll start with you on this one, Jay. Is he a top 5 welterweight in your book?
Well, I probably should preface this by saying he's like about a $400,000 heir because of all that happens in taxes and fees and expenses. This is a real tough. I have to look at the rankings and see the names: Usman, Woodley, Covington, Masvidal, Edwards. That's a strong top 5. And then right after that, Dos Anjos, Lima, Rory, Askren, Lawler. That's I stack that up against any division, and I don't know if you could find a more like a murderer's row of the top 10. If he's not in the top 5, he is right there. I can easily see an argument for it. I know that some in other circles and fans and whatnot are concerned of rankings from like a bias towards UFC fighters and against those in Bellator, One World Series, Pro Fighters League, etc. And to a degree, there kind of is an implicit bias because the level of competition is generally higher, the rosters are larger, they can pay more money to the fighters and all those kinds of things. So the UFC fighters have more of a chance, theoretically speaking, to face top guys. And then in terms of Bellator and UFC's relationship, there are several examples that we have of former UFC fighters that were either cut or left of their own accord that went over to Bellator specifically and won titles. Mousasi, Rory McDonald, Benson Henderson's a fight away again. I think he actually fought for the belt. He fought Chandler for it. And Ryan Bader won 2 belts. So you see the other guys like the Askrens come over, a consensus top 10 welterweight, stomp through Bellator, stomp through 1, and barely won 1 fight in 3 tries. So to a degree, top guys are top guys. I mean, look at World Series of Fighting. Their 2 champions, Marlon Moraes and Justin Gaethje, are killers, and they came to the UFC and they got a couple bumps and bruises, but they're top 5 guys still. Kind of ending on one little note about Lima, Sean Grande, former Bellator play-by-play commentator, you guys might have heard this, said that Douglas Lima is always going to be in the shadow of his brother Diego Lima, who was on 2 seasons of The Ultimate Fighter and has fought several times, and I think he's approaching a 500 record as a UFC fighter. Douglas Lima, Bellator champion, is in the shadow of his brother simply because he's in the UFC. To that, I have to say, nah, bro.
Yeah, he wisely deleted that tweet. When I saw it, I just like, oh hell no! I had to say something sarcastic. I threw a shot at it actually too in my post fight column. But it's like how woefully disconnected from reality do you have to be to say that Douglas Lima was living in Diego's shadow in any way, shape, or form? Wow, that is a horrible take. So as I said on Twitter, there are some people who really do this because they love it, they know the sport, and they're really invested in it, and there are other people who just do it because they're assigned. I don't think there's any other explanation for that sort of lunacy. Jesus Christ. So all right, Jason. So are you putting Douglas Lima in your top 5 in the welterweight division?
I personally put Diego Lima. No.
he is a wrecking machine.
I did go for that. No, I don't. And I actually just kind of listed it out, like Usman, Woodley, Colby, Jorge, Edwards, which is basically what you had just said, Jay. But yeah, I mean, there's just too many guys in there, and we didn't even mention the Stephen Thompsons. Till he's kind of on the periphery on that right now, but it just kind of tells you what that division is stacked like. And yeah, 155 has always been the most stacked division, I think, by consensus. But welterweight, I feel like in the past couple of years has kind of crept up on that. I think it started to kind of change that, and maybe that's because there isn't a GSP anymore. somebody that's just stacked on top of the division and cleaning out contenders for so long. Now there's a bit more flux, and you just kind of really get more of a picture of what that 170 looks like in that top 5. So I'm hesitant to say that, and who knows, he could go through all those guys. But, even like I just said about Stephen Thompson, who I wouldn't put in the top 5, did beat Rory, and this is MMA math, but he did beat, Rory, and Rory is the one that beat Lima last. So it's kind of a weird argument. You never really know until it happens, and you could end up coming over and you could end up being a fighter that really makes a difference. Everybody thought the Strikeforce guys were not up to championship par. And then simultaneously we had Daniel Cormier, we had Luke Rockhold, and who else did we have? Oh, Woodley. They all became champions around the same time, if not all three at the same time. And it just really kind of shows that you don't know until it really happens, but until you see it, it could be a Ben Askren or it could be a Daniel Cormier. You never know.
Yeah, good point there. So Pat, top 5 for you?
No, I'd put him. I'd put him close. He's definitely up there. He's on the outskirts, I think. But it comes down to a couple of factors. One, right now, well, as Jason just said, welterweight is stacked. It's 2 months ago I was researching a piece and doing something about the overall records, combined wins and losses of full divisions, and welterweight had the highest of something of like 71%. Like they are stacked, more stacked than I think people realize. Like lightweight's great, but welterweight's right there. And as you guys have alluded to, it comes down to another issue of we just won't know until there's no way to really know until he gets in there and fights some of the top welterweights in the world. I mean, a whole thing that the UFC did that's talked about in the antitrust case that I've covered is they purposefully bought up the best fighters they could so that you had this brand recognition of, these other guys might be great, but they're not fighting the cream of the crop, the top of the top. So we're always going to hold that power over the other promotions, and that's exactly what's happened. I think Lima could, I'd love to see Lima versus Masvidal. I think that'd be an amazing fight. But until we do, it's kind of hard to say. You've got Korshkov, you've lost to Rory, now you beat him, but it wasn't exactly like a thrilling win. You knocked out MVP in spectacular fashion, which is great, but he's not exactly a super tested prospect. So to me, he's on the edge, and I think he would do very well in the UFC. But when it comes down to it, until you see him fight some of those top 5 caliber guys that are universally recognized, it's hard to say that he belongs in that realm. Especially again when you've got people like Stephen Thompson, who has had some setbacks but is still very dangerous, and you've got I think I can't say his last name.
Yeah, Ponzinibbio.
Ponzinibbio. Yeah, I think he once he gets his shot, I think he's going to be skyrocketing too. So yeah, it's one of those unfortunate circumstances of I want to say yes, in my heart wants to say yes, but my brain unfortunately is like, nah, man.
We haven't mentioned Will Brooks yet. Part of that discussion. Will Brooks, that was one Bellator export that didn't work out.
Yeah. Will Brooks' case seemed kind of strange to me because I do think he was a victim of circumstance as much as an increased level of competition. Because it seemed like he had a little strange bit. I remember he fought Cowboy Oliveira when he decided he could make 155, which was nuts, and he fought a guy who was like 8 pounds overweight and lost to that. I think he had like some sort of injury in the middle of one of his fights. He got caught in some sort of crazy fluke submission with Charles Oliveira as well. Like he just kind of had bad circumstances in addition to the increased level of competition, in my opinion. But I'm a little biased there on that one. I had some high hopes for Will Brooks in the UFC. Now, just looking at the welterweight rankings, so I pulled up Sherdog's rankings, the only rankings that really matter, and and I'm kind of liking where the Sherdog rankings are going on here. Now, I really can't complain too much because I added no input to the ranking conversation this week. So it is what it is. Now, just looking at this, like, I would kind of favor the only person who, I mean, he's in the UFC rankings, he's ranked at number 5. Our rankings have him at number 6. Rafael dos Anjos, I think, is a very winnable fight for Lima. That sounds like a test he can pass. I think Leon Edwards and him make a very good fight as well. I'm not sure who I would favor in that. Masvidal, I probably would favor Lima. Right now, like the way Masvidal has this tendency of losing decisions, probably want to side with Lima in that one. I don't want to compliment Colby Covington, so I won't say anything about him. And
Colby
yeah,
Covington is a fighter.
Yeah, we'll just
He's so likable though, you know, just so likable.
Colby Covington is a human being, and that's as far as we're gonna go with that.
Like a face.
Yeah, he has like DNA and stuff.
Yeah, the Brendan Schwab, Henry Cejudo backstage thing.
Yes,
good.
That
was hilarious.
That was peak Colby Covington.
It's like, wow. It's like, man, get your hoes in line, bro. But that's another story right there. All right, so before we go off the rails yet again, now that the Bellator welterweight Grand Prix has been concluded, did it live up to your expectations? I love the hesitation there. I love the hesitation.
It's like,
it had issues structurally. I think first and foremost, allowing the champion who's defending all the way through to fight in another division the year the tournament is starting, and watching him get smoked in 2 rounds by a much larger fighter and then come back down with, possible head trauma and everything. It's not a good start. I mean, you look at just the way the brackets lined up. Lima fought Koreshkov in September 2018, MVP in May 2019, and Rory in October. Rory fought Fitch for his first fight was April. So there's a pretty big gap between when Lima first fought in the bracket and Rory first fought. They also had issues with Rory MacDonald as the champion, basically admitting he's not all in it. He doesn't want to hurt people. Now, I respect it. I understand what he's going through to a degree. The spiritual level, he can, however he feels. Okay, great. But this is the hurt business. If you're concerned, if you're almost, I don't want to say pulling your punches, but if you're not taking maneuvers and doing things to inflict damage and win the fight accordingly, you got issues. The Neiman Gracie fight. Again, I'm a big goof in a Hawaiian shirt. What do I know? But there were so many instances for 25 minutes where Rory could have landed grounded pound and basically didn't, just elected to kind of hold position and win the rounds and win by points. And I've seen Rory deliver some hellacious grounded pound. So it wasn't a matter of his inability he wasn't incapable of doing so. I don't know if it was the gun-shy nature. But speaking of being gun shy, the finals, one fighter is gun shy because he doesn't want to get kicked in the legs, and the other because he doesn't want to get taken down. That can drag, and this dragged. The tournament, it ended not with a bang, but with a whimper.
Yeah, I would say that the whimpers carried on throughout the majority of the tournament. I mean, let's not forget the massive disappointment that MVP versus Paul Daly was. So the 2 matchups that everyone was looking forward to the most ended up being the 2 least enjoyable fights, and that was the rematch between Lima and MacDonald and MVP Daly. So, and then on top of that, MacDonald advanced off of a disputed draw with John Fitch. So I wasn't quite pleased with this, but this is also something that, aside from the scheduling issues that you brought up, Jay, I don't think this is really Bellator's fault. I think it just happened this way. So Jason, now, if you were Scott Coker, if you suddenly morphed into the second best promoter in North American MMA, what would you do differently about this tournament?
Hi, I'm Scott Coker, and I'm the best promoter in North America. Honestly, yeah, I mean, I didn't really kind of think about the fact that, yeah, I think I probably was thinking about it around that time, but it really did cut the wind out of their sails by having their champion lose right before it, because that's the real intrigue. And I think most people, if you were to predict it, it would have been Douglas Lima again versus Rory. I think that nobody really thought Paul Daly would do it. MVP was kind of an untested, kind of protected was the way that he was seen. And he actually, I will give him some credit. You know, he actually did exceed expectations a little bit in that Lima fight. He actually hurt him. A lot of people kind of forget about that because he was knocked out so spectacularly. But when it came down to it, he actually showed pretty well. Not so much in the Paul Daly fight. I mean, Paul Daly's takedowns, man, incredible.
Division I Daly.
High-level British wrestling.
I mean, there were some great moments in there. I really enjoyed seeing Neiman Gracie. Ed Ruth was kind of seen as the dark horse for the tournament. Neiman Gracie managed to get a win over that guy. I don't think many people saw that, but there's a lot of missteps along the way. I mean, having a draw in your tournament is about as bad as it gets. Yeah. I think when it comes down to it, a lot of it was frankly out of their control, because the thing about modern MMA and the thing that kind of sucks about Grand Prix, and PFL we've seen do it a whole lot different. They just have a whole different take on it. But generally, you're dealing with fighters that want to take a couple months off, and you're at the mercy of their schedules. So if they decide that, yeah, I need 4 or 5 months in between, then you have to wait. You can't tell them that they have to do it. I mean, you could try to strong arm them, but I don't think that'll go too well. So especially if you're supposed to be the kind of friendlier organization, you're supposed to be the antithesis of the UFC. You kind of want to be anything that won't be perceived as that. Bjorn Rebney is long gone, so we don't need any more of that.
Mexico.
No more murdered dogs. No.
Yeah. Let's start a union, though. So for me, I think a lot of it was out of their control. Maybe I'm just viewing this with rose-colored glasses, lenses, whatever you want to say. But I do think it actually ends up pretty well, looking good on the organization. You have this kind of legacy champion for the organization, one of their best, most highly touted fighters, ends out on top, and it shows that Bellator does actually have really good talent, and you should be paying attention to them and stop overlooking them, because they did just best some of these classic UFC names in the midst of this tournament. So I think overall they did about as good as they could, and there's a bit of the mercy that they are out there. But yes, Rory getting totally smoked by Mousasi right before it did massively take out the air of the tournament before it even started, which is really unfortunate.
Big time. So, any final thoughts on the Bellator Welterweight Grand Prix before we move on from that chapter?
Do it again.
Yay! We'll start it with the trilogy fight between MacDonald and Lima. So, now let's go on to my favorite title for a show segment that I've ever been involved with, and that is I'm Not Surprised, Mr. Falcons. I want you guys to tell me about something that surprised you the most from all the events over the weekend. We had 2 Bellators. We had the UFC. I'm sure there was some other combat sports as well. If you are hip to any of that, anything related to the pre-fight, post-fight, or the fights themselves. Pat, I'll start with you. What is your I'm Not Surprised, Mr. Falcons moment of the week?
I mean, mine was, honestly, it was how big of a letdown Lima MacDonald was. And I'll kind of use this to just take my turn to talk about the tournament, since you just didn't ask me about it. But, but
tell us about the tournament, Pat. How'd you feel the welterweight tournament went?
No, it's I was surprised, because that looked, if you looked on the one side, Rory struggled and kind of had those issues. I was very thankful that there was a tournament in place, because if John Fitch and Rory MacDonald had to fight again right after that draw, I would have been pretty upset, and they had a reason to just ignore the fact that it was a draw, and he moved on. But Lima on the other side of that bracket looked great. He subbed out who Korshkov, I believe was the name. Yeah, he subbed out Korshkov. He had that spectacular KO against MVP. He looked raring to go. He looked better than he had in a long time. Looked amazing. And so I was expecting either he goes in there and just starches Rory, or it becomes a gunfight and it's a fun time. And then it was what it was, and it was kind of, oh man, like that was the one fight I thought for sure out of all of the fights this weekend would probably deliver fireworks, and somehow Damian Maia and Ben Askren was more entertaining to watch than that. So that's my biggest wow. I can't believe, I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons.
All right. So, Jason, what's your I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons moment of the week?
Actually, I kind of want to reverse this back around because this is such a weird thing to me. And I'll just say it. Can I curse?
Fuck yeah.
I think I've already cursed anyway. I just didn't think about it. Now I'm just like, wait.
Stars and garters.
It's so provocative.
Lord have mercy.
So why the fuck is Bellator constantly doing this? And this is the age of too many events, too many things going on, multiple events in one weekend. I kind of get the idea that you want to maybe save a bit of cash and put them right next to each other. But you guys, as media, I'm like the YouTube asshole out there. You guys do get a chance to talk to Scott Coker. You guys do get a chance. Has there ever been any kind of formal answer to, oh yeah, we're just trying to fill time? Like, what is the reason behind this? Because it does continually surprise me as each of these weekends comes along, and you're just like, man, this is so. Why the fuck are we watching a 2011 rematch? Main card for Bellator 231. I don't need to see that fight again. And I watched it live, but I wasn't that happy about it. I was kind of sad.
I would love to ask Scott Coker why he does this. And I know I've been a part of scrums where this question, was posed in some way, shape, or form. And Scott Coker is a master at not really answering the question, but still coming across like the nice guy. So I don't remember any real answers coming out of those inquiries, but I don't know, Pat, looks like you're itching to say something about this one.
Yeah, well, so because you're right, Coker has never given a straight answer on this, but I have heard a couple things from other people who have asked, and then from when I went to Bellator Pitbull versus Chandler, I talked to one of the PR guys about it just randomly. And so he didn't confirm this, but what would make sense in my mind from a business standpoint is you have so many dates where you have to put on so many cards, especially now with the zone. And then you get a casino like Mohegan Sun who does not have a ton of acts or things booked there over the weekends. So they treat it more like an act of if a random older band was going to show up for a full weekend, they will often give discounts on venue bookings. So Bellator looks at it as, hey, we can not only save money on booking the venue, but then we get to do, 2 of our obligated events for DAZN. Win-win, we're going to save money. I don't know how much truth there is to that, but it does kind of make sense from what I've looked at or what I've heard. So
can you ask it this way? If you do decide to ask it, you don't have to. I'm not tying your hands behind your back on this, but like, if you were to ask it, this is the way I would ask it. I'm just being an asshole right now, but like, yes, it does save you money, Mr. Scott Coker, #1 promoter in North America. It does save you money by having 2 events right back to back. And yes, it does make it easier for production and all that, which is a total nightmare. But aren't you dividing your audience? Because for me, I chose to split the difference. I didn't watch all of both events. And it's my job to do it. And I didn't do it. I did a bad job.
You're not the only one, because I sure as hell did not watch both events live. That's for sure.
Dude, I don't have to be the most hardcore fan on the planet. I don't care. So yeah, somebody else can say they watched all of it. But I mean, just think of us. We just admitted that we're the most hardcore fans that there probably are out there. So much that we made it a part of our lives. It's something, an obligation that we have, and we're like, I'm gonna pass.
Yeah. I don't really see the benefit of this at all. And this is actually another talking point I had in my column. It was just like, if you took some of the fights, the good fights that were on Bellator 231, you took some of the crap off of 232 and you put it together, you got a pretty damn good card.
Yeah.
You know, there's no reason, like, my I'm not surprised Mr. Falcons moment was actually that the fact that the Mir and Nelson fight wasn't a total drag, that it wasn't the worst fight in the world. But there's no reason why that should be a main event. There's literally no reason why Frank Mir and Roy Nelson in 2019, as completely washed as they both are, should be main eventing any major organization's card. That is unacceptable. But it makes for a decent fight on the main card. I'll accept it as the third one from the top. Yeah. If the rest of the card looks good. And then especially when you have an event like the Grand Prix, which they put so much promotional muscle behind. They did a lot trying to promote this, and they've stretched themselves so crazy trying to make this happen. Why on the night where it's supposed to end, when it's ending with the two gentlemen that you probably thought were going to make it there, and this is the ending you envision, why would you now put on a display across the street that's going to distract from the show that everyone really came to see? It doesn't really make any logical sense. And again too, like I was at Bellator 228, I think it was. The Machida and Musasi rematch in the Forum, and you had Bellator Dublin going on the day before.
Yep.
Why? Why? Yeah, you have this featherweight Grand Prix and this announcement show for the brackets and everything. You got this big production lined up, and you're trying to mix up formats, but why have this sideshow going on to distract us from what we really came to see? I don't. But what do I know? I mean,
not to mention in America how the Dublin card was broken up.
God, yeah, like the rants we've gone on about that. Like, Jesus.
Business, man. They get paid the same amount either way. They cut costs. They're the most profitable they've been. I mean, based on the antitrust documents, and internal documents, they're looking to be more profitable than they've ever been. And it's because same thing UFC did when Endeavor bought them. They cut costs, and it's not about fans making fans happy. It's about, you're giving me guaranteed money and I can cut my costs. Great. That's more money for us. It sucks, but that's. Yeah.
But isn't it though? Like, if you don't have fans by the end of your deal, you're just kind of fucked, right?
It's not the long-term play.
Short term.
It shouldn't be, but But then again, I mean, we did watch those fights, right? Like, I mean, not live. Well, not live, but you did go back and watch them.
But we're also like different breed of knucklehead. We like us four don't represent the average consumer of fight sports. We're all mentally deranged. Therefore, we devote so much of ourselves to this. We are all fucked up in the head, and this is where you end up. You end up on the Walkout Network.
Welcome to the party, pal.
Not gonna argue that.
We made it.
Oh, mama, I'm back. Goodness. All right. So Jay, please share with the world your I'm not surprised Mr. Falcons moment.
Well, I could wax poetic about K1 Frank Mir using leg kicks because that's a thing. Or Askren looking relatively feeble out there when he hit the ground, or the one championship statistics I mentioned earlier. But my biggest hold the phone moment came at Bellator 232, and it wasn't the main event. I'll tell you that much. Now, I'm the kind of sucker, I have to cover it, that I did watch start to finish. I covered 232 start to finish after the play-by-play that morning for Singapore, so it was quite a rough weekend. But there was something that happened that that kind of made it all worth it, to this whole endeavor. Patrick Mix, dude from Angola, New York, south of Buffalo, New York. So in the first round, Patrick Mix, who's undefeated, grabbed his opponent Isaiah Chapman's back, and it looked like it was going to be a formality from there. He'd get the rear naked choke, move on, okay, we'd be done with it, and okay, congratulations, you're now 6 fights away from being a contender. And so Chapman was standing up, and Mix was riding him like a backpack, and then of all the things he could do, he grabbed down to pull his leg out from underneath him. For those unfamiliar, the move he hit, you really should look this up, it's called a Suloev Stretch. Now, it's named for a notorious hitman and a former UFC and Pride fighter, Amar Suloev, who is no longer with us. Basically, it's a modified knee bar where you bend the leg all the way back and torque there. It's kind of like a hip or a thigh slicer. So knee bar may be a little misleading there, but the reason why this is so interesting is because in major promotional history, Pride, UFC, Bellator, Pro Fighters League, blah, 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 all those names on the line, we've only seen this move hit 3 times in all of them. Thousands of upwards of 10,000 fights, give or take. Kenny Robertson hit it on Brock Jardine in 2013 in the UFC 157. And then Aljo Sterling hit Cody Stamann with one at 228, UFC 228 last year. And then not to be outdone, a couple fights later, Zabit Magomedsharipov hit one on Brandon Davis the same night. It's a remarkable, unusual, and extremely painful move. And to see him pull that off was my highlight of the night. And of course, the fact that he's done it before is kind of more impressive to me, that this isn't just a one-off, oh, I found it and I hit it. No, he has setups to a Suloev Stretch. That's a very unusual thing. Alexei Oleinik, UFC heavyweight and longtime marvel of submission game, hits this Ezekiel choke, where he can be on his back and he can choke you out with his arms. Now, he's hit a dozen of these in his career. It does not make the 13th he hits less impressive because of how he did it. So that knee bar, that Suloev Stretch is just chef's kiss, man. Well done. Well done.
That was beautiful. And it's just one of those things where the more you do it, the more impressive it gets. Because if you know it's coming and he still pulls it off, that is some gorgeous stuff right there. I'm actually very surprised that no one mentioned the debut of a porn star by the name of Rebecca Brigman, her professional debut as the first fight on the Bellator card.
She got smashed.
Sign me up when Jada Fire makes her debut. But anyway, let's move on from there. Now,
let's talk about that.
Actually, let's talk about that. I'll also accept Melrose Fox. Now, so let's move on to what ended up being the craziest story in mixed martial arts for quite some time. I mean, in real time as this was developing, this is one of the times I felt really fortunate to be a member of MMA media, because it's like, wow, this chaos is just unfolding right before our eyes. Mm-hmm. Oh, how tasty is it all? So let's just go ahead and have this open forum discussion here. Nate Diaz and his ultimatum to the UFC and USADA preserving the main event in the BMF title. What were your initial thoughts as this was going on?
I didn't have a lot of nice things to say as I was covering news, as it was breaking, as I was busy trying to put it together, getting his statement, and basically saying, when that story came out, I was on news, so I couched it in language saying that Nate Diaz claims this, because Nate Diaz is Nate Diaz. You got to be careful not to say this is official, this is happening. No, this is how Nate Diaz has presented his argument, so you can decide from there, allowing our audience to kind of freak out, of course, as they should. It feels like a slightly different version with a different, with a different ending than the UFC 232 debacle, in terms of just a I don't know, kind of a paradigm shift of, this is how the process has been, this is how we carry it out, it takes this long, we get it situated, and then suddenly, oh, we're cleared in 3 days. But I get it. from a financial perspective, and Pat, I'm sure will be happy to chime in on this. Losing Diaz would have killed the card. Period. The end. They probably would have had to cancel it. The savvy consumer, such as any of us or the millions of viewers watching this broadcast around the world, would you really throw $65 at Jorge Masvidal versus Leon Edwards, Wonderboy 2, Vicente Luque, or if the co-main event bumped up, Darren Till, Kelvin Gastelum? No. It wouldn't have salvaged what they had there. They had the little lightning in a bottle, the perfect moment. They struck while the iron is hot. I'm sure I have a couple more cliched phrases to say about it. UFC would have moved heaven and earth to make sure this fight stuck together. I was not surprised, Mr. Falcons, to see this a couple days later that we have the 2019 version of picograms with organic, vegan, plant-based daily multivitamin. Man, when an anti-doping agency, when a supposed third party gets involved in the process, it has to avoid the appearance of impropriety. We can't look at it and go, I don't know if what's going on, something smells funny. We can't have that feeling because then we don't trust it. And USADA has not done so. And this is just another example where they can wheel out all the procedures and say, well, actually, we made a rule change. We just didn't tell you. Ugh, guys, this isn't... There should be policy. There should be procedure. But this just felt wrong on so many levels to me.
You know what? You definitely reminded me of something, Jay, because my initial thoughts, I know we had a long conversation about a lot of this last week where, talking about UFC 232 and just what that event felt like and how, at least in my opinion, that kind of changed the way I look at the sport of mixed martial arts, just how all those events unfolded. But I think this is more reminiscent of UFC 200. Now, while I am very disappointed that I'm not packing my bags to go to the Forum this week, because I was planning on, hey, they're going to move this card to the Forum, so I'm going to get to go to it live. But UFC 200, Brock Lesnar made his appearance against Mark Hunt, and his adverse findings for his test came out after the fact. Now, if we are to believe what Nate Diaz is saying, and I'll preface that by saying, I'm not inclined to not believe Nate Diaz. I'm inclined to believe that Diaz believes what he's saying at the very least. It's probably the best way I can put that. Now, if he is accurate with what he's talking about, that he was sort of asked by quote unquote them to be quiet. We got a lot to talk about, because when I think back to UFC 200, I think the general consensus with a lot of people who are in the know or just follow this very closely thought like, yeah, they probably knew that shit beforehand.
Yep.
So when a fight of this magnitude, a fight with this much on the line, where they've got a special belt being made, they got The Rock coming to present it. It's in Madison Square Garden. This is hyped up there. Actually, the marketing team is actually being creative and doing different things for this fight. This is like the first time the UFC marketing department has ever done anything. So
you see those shirts? You see those East versus West shirts?
Oh, those are super trash. Those are trash. Oh my God, get them all the way the fuck up out of here.
On the belt, that must be it. That must be why that's.
The Grand Theft Auto graphics are really cool. Like, that's really cool. And the parental advisory label thing, that's really dope. Like, that's creativity. But they rolled out the red carpet, and then they're gonna let this vegan, organic, whole foods supplement, which is kind of like the combination of all the safe dietary buzzwords you can think of. They're gonna let that ruin it. Oh, hell to the nah. I think Nate Diaz just jumped the gun, and he just said, nope, this is this, and he just blurted out the mouth, and then they had to deal with it and try to get in front of it. So, fellas, am I completely nuts, or am I on to something here? Should I be replacing this baseball cap with a tinfoil hat?
Yep. Yeah. I'll raise you a situation. UFC 152. We're talking about past events. Nothing ever actually came out about Vitor. Everybody found out through rumblings. So, to his credit, if he didn't say anything, it is totally possible that we'd be hearing like, hey, we're actually hearing that Nate Diaz failed the test and USADA made some special kind of changes for him, which is what happened in the public sense. And because he got in front of the story, it ended up working out for him a lot better. But you can kind of imagine if it's just like, oh, yeah, they just decided to whip that, but they didn't do it with Josh Barnett. They didn't do it with Frank Mir. They didn't do it with a whole host of guys. And they're going to go ahead and make this exception here because it played out in public. It looked good for him. So that I think there's comparisons in all these things, but I do think that is at least worth bearing in mind. So I don't know. That's what I think.
Yeah. So I'm about to grab some aluminum foil right now. Pat, save me.
Man, I'm gonna save you from wearing that hat and putting on some more aluminum foil because that's how I feel about it. No, I mean, when I first heard about the situation, I was like, oh, there goes Nate Diaz fucking up the company's plan again. Like, good on you, man.
Consistency.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, so the thing is after the Jones situation, where again that just about derailed the entire thing until they had to move it to an entirely different state and give a bunch of reasons why this made sense to move it and all that. They changed the policy where, well, now we tell you after the fact, and we don't announce it until we've done our due diligence. And you had, I think, Neil Magny in a similar situation where they didn't really reveal it until he had. I think they didn't reveal it until he. USADA didn't officially reveal it until he had been cleared of it. I believe that's the case. But so, again, like Jason pointed out, we heard rumblings that it was because he failed a drug test. So, yeah. That's not going to look good on Nate. So he got out in front of it. It's one of those things where they also changed the threshold limits. I think a lot of people miss that in the whole we've exonerated Nate is like, well, we set different thresholds. Like, oh, okay. Like, cool. That's new too. Like, let's just take away all transparency with this process in case we fuck up another main event, and then we can let it come out after. So Nate instantly was like, nope, you're either going to fix this right now because I'm not going to go fight and then have rumors be, spread that either failed the test or have it come out after that, oh, I actually did fail a test based on your thresholds. He basically put the UFC in a bind saying like, well, you can either clear me now, or you can not get your main event. And as Jay said, I mean, they would have bumped up Till and Gastelum to an interim middleweight title fight. I'm sure it would have been terrible.
Boy. Ooh, I got gross feelings thinking about that.
Yeah. I was kind of curious. So what would be the best way to do it then? So for them to change policy, because I think we pretty much, I don't know, maybe we don't agree, but they probably should have changed the policies that have messed up a lot of other fighters.
Yeah.
So how do you effectively change it? And I think we all agree that this also isn't the way to do it. But how would you do it ideally?
See, I'm not quite sure exactly how we do it, but we do know something needs to change. And I'll refer back to UFC 232. There was a point where John Jones at I want to say that press conference that turned ugly really quick, where he said he likened himself to being a martyr for drug testing and PED culture and everything. And my initial thoughts was, what the hell is he talking about? Like, that is nuts. But now when I'm looking back on it, maybe he was right. He might have been right in some sort of warped way. That might be true. Because the science is really evolving as we speak. There's not a lot known for sure about what all these things do to the human body and how long they stay there and what levels they can detect things as the tests get more and more sophisticated. So it does call for some modern solutions to the problem. I'm definitely not going to stand up here on the soapbox and claim that I know the answer, but I do know something needs to change. Yeah. Something has to change. But here's one for you, gentlemen, and maybe this will play into the soapbox derby right here, where we get to stand up and shout about something. Although when Jay does a solo, I like to call it the Petri dish. But another story here. I am of the mind where this could be the final blow for USADA and the UFC being partnered. I have never seen the overall fandom turn on USADA as fast as Nate Diaz's Twitter fingers. It was instantaneous. We didn't see this with 200 when that main event fell out with Jones and Cormier. We hadn't seen it with. I don't think this was under USADA, but like the Bigfoot Silva and Mark Hunt rematch that was supposed to happen, when that got canceled because of Bigfoot's test, like Anderson Silva's test. There have been so many beloved names and big fights that didn't happen as a result of drug testing, but I've never seen it turn ugly against USADA as fast as it did with Nate Diaz. So, fellas, do you think this is it? Is this what kind of puts the nail in the coffin for the UFC and USADA's partnership?
I
don't think so. Well, you go first, Jason.
Sorry. Yeah, I personally thought it turned faster with the Jones situation, because Jones is kind of this figure right now that people just really dislike, and especially because they thought he was guilty, and they thought what was actually being done. Like, the difference here is people actually do think Nate Diaz is not guilty, and they actually are mad at USADA for the opposite reason. Whereas with Jones, it's like, he's guilty, you guys are covering it up, and you guys are willing to move a whole event over, and these guys have no integrity for what they're doing because they're actually going to allow a cheater. And this is a popular viewpoint that came out. I'm not saying it's my viewpoint.
Yes,
but it's
it is. You told me it is.
I never said that. I think yeah, maybe that'll be my soapbox, because yes, it will. So I've already just changed that. So we'll side table that one. But I actually think it was worse with Jones, because you looked at he went on the JRE for a 3-hour podcast and just got Nowitzki did, and just absolutely roasted. Absolutely roasted. Everybody's just like, all right, you guys are just completely in bed with the cash. You guys, and before that moment, before that news came out, I would still say most people are like, yeah, USADA is the reason why, a lot of these heavyweights started to look a whole lot slimmer by the time they came around, except for the ones who got through the loopholes, Brock Lesnar. But so I think that this might be the nail in the coffin, though. You might be right about that. I think the UFC likes to hang that flag up. They like to say, we've got this level of testing. We're one of the cleanest sports on the planet, when it is still frankly viewed, like I have a connection to, the UK with Tom all the time. It's still very much viewed like it was in the 90s here. So that's one thing the UFC can say, nope. We are above board. We're forget the board. We're in the building above it. We're in just a separate chamber altogether. We're holier than thou. So I don't really know that it's necessarily worse, but it could be the nail in the coffin, especially for American fans.
I'd like to think that that this is worse for USADA than the general public thinking that they are just in bed with the UFC, as was the narrative being played out for 232. Because at that point, it's kind of like, all right, you accept corruption, you accept business people being all about business, and just kind of this blanket acceptance. That, keep in mind that UFC 232 went on to sell somewhere around like 800,000 pay-per-views, despite pissing off a lot of people in the process. Now, when you're talking about just pointing at someone who a lot of people believe to be innocent, and someone who is such a cult favorite, that seems to have risen the anger more so than just blatant, wow, this is wrong, as opposed to incompetence mixed with this is wrong. Is that a fair statement?
I think too punitive is not as bad as allowing to cheat, because that is the perception that the two are up against. But for me, it just felt like maybe I just published a Jones video next to it, and everybody was just going batshit crazy over it.
I do remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think maybe my perspective is a little bit skewed on it for that reason, but it does really feel like, if you're going to perceive it, that is what it pretty much comes down to. You're either too punitive, which it's like, okay, well, that doesn't necessarily mean you're corrupt. to the same extent as letting someone cheat. It shows that maybe you're too punitive and you need to bring back a little bit of that, and you need to. I mean, there's all these statistics now about how often they've actually caught somebody. I think it's like 7%, or probably a lot less than that, actually.
Very, very low.
Yeah. You probably know way more than I do about that one, Jay. But it is something where I think if you're perceived to allow somebody to cheat, I think that's always going to be worse than, oh, okay, well, you were too punitive.
All right. Fair statement right there. Pat, anything you want to add to this?
I would just say two quick things. One, because Jason mostly covered it all. One, UFC is never going to end their USADA relationship. It's never going to happen for exactly the reason that Jason pointed out. Of it puts them, it's a brand distinguisher, and for the fact it insulates them if someone happens to die in the cage one day, which hopefully
Will
not
happen.
That never happens. But that gives them even more insurance of, hey, we did everything we could. And yeah, in terms of as testing gets more and more, a big problem is that everyone takes supplements, and the supplement industry is super unregulated. And there's plenty of documentaries and articles you can watch and read where it's just ridiculous at how unregulated it is. And you can basically just take anything, put it in a container, and say, hey, this will make your muscles big, regardless of how you get it. I think the only fix, or my proposed fix, which they would never do, is the UFC literally pays for, like, you bring all of your supplements, every single one you buy. When you run out, you buy a new one, and you immediately get it tested as fast as USADA tested Diaz's, and then you get to use it. And then hey, that's probably the best option I have, and it's not a great one for the fix, but it's USADA's not going away anytime soon. It's just gonna be there forever, I think.
All right, Jay. Anything you want to add before we move on?
No, I'm with Pat 100%. I think that they can, and Jason, he said it perfectly, that they have the ability to say that we stand above the rest of the promotions. We use Olympic level testing. We use WADA level standards. Do you, Bellator, Pro Fighters League, One Championship, etc.? No, they have that. They have that as a selling point, as a marketing tactic. Our athletes are tested more than any other. They have that to work with. So I think that they can, the fans, and I have personally observed this lately, that I can attest to the negative reaction towards the Diaz situation, possibly eclipsing Jones because of the target. Because the target was Jones was villain. Jones had done these things versus Diaz. We love Diaz. What he only smokes weed. He doesn't take steroids.
And he shares his weed also with the crowd.
And it's all you're on steroids. And they're buzzwords and catchphrases that people bring into their lexicon. They'll think of Nate Diaz and they'll think of, he's just like us. He smokes a lot of weed. He says the F word. He doesn't care. He slaps people in the face. Ha ha ha. But
that's like me, man.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's all day. It's all day. All day.
All day. It's not weed causing trouble. That's me, man.
But it's who they're mad about. They're mad. Oh, you trying to just screw Diaz versus, oh, you're trying to screw. Well, in the Jones situation, they weren't trying to go out. They were kind of screwing the fans and the people that were there because of what went down. They weren't going after Jones because Jones was flagged. Yes. Yeah. And so I think that would be a difference in perception.
All right. So all good points by everybody, especially me. So now we're going to move on to the speed bag, and this is where I get to flex my power. I get to flex my authority, and I am in charge, and you mofos will bend the knee. So let me start up the round timer here. So you will each have 10 seconds to answer these questions. So the first question, I will start off with you, Jay. We'll have to hip these youngsters up to how we do things around here on the Walkout Network. Although, Pat, you've been on here before. But still, I just wanted to sound important.
Good job, man. You did it.
Well, you know. Sorry. So let me make sure that my My timer is done right here. I don't need rest time. I don't need prep time. And I don't need an inner round warning. So here we go. Keep the screen on. Now, Jay, the first question is to you. Duke Roufus briefly announced that Anthony Pettis versus Donald Cerrone 2 was being put together. Is that the right fight to make? You have 10 seconds and go.
Man, Cerrone wouldn't turn a fight down with his grandmother. I personally think we should get some fresh matchups. There's a lot more to work with. Do the Cerrone-McGregor thing. People want that.
All right. Oh, just in time. Just when I was about to flex my authority. All right. So, Jason, your turn. Does Duke Roufus announcing Pettis and Cerrone 2, does that sound like the fight to make? And go.
I dig it. I think they should do it, and I think that should probably do the Conor versus Justin Gaethje fight, so I'm not too worried about that. These guys are in legend kind of.
Oh, my goodness, he's gone over time, and I am in charge. I am in charge. I am in command here. How dare you disrespect my clock, Pat? You got 10 seconds, man. Pettis versus Cerrone 2. Is that the right fight?
Yeah, I think so. I like it. I think it's good.
I think it's really good.
Yeah, just got to stretch it out.
I
really like it. All right. All right. So Jason, I will start this one off for you. Now, why did the UFC reward Greg Hardy in his no contest with a marquee matchup against number 7 ranked Alexander Volkov? You have 10 seconds and go.
Just like all this USADA stuff, controversy sells. Greg Hardy is a controversy magnet. Look at this whole year. It's going to sell. That's why they put him in that main event. Boom.
Oh, perfect timing. That is, I'm very impressed. Very impressed with that.
The first one I had to gauge it. I gauged it horribly, so I had it by the second one.
As long as I had my moment, that's all that matters. All right, Pat. So you're up. Why would the UFC reward Greg Hardy with his no contest using a marquee matchup against Alexander Volkov? Let's go.
Most of the other heavyweights are booked, and they want to shoot him up the rankings. They're hoping he'll pull with Derek Lewis. Easiest person to do it to. Yeah.
All right. Perfect timing there. All right, Jay.
I love that. And yeah.
Yeah, just burning up those last couple seconds. Because no, these seconds do not roll over.
3, 2, 1. My answer is complete.
All right, Jay. You're next up. So, why did Greg Hardy get this matchup against Volkov?
I'm gonna go Jason Burgos and say I don't know. They would not have afforded this opportunity to other guys. They could have let him go and do it, but they didn't. Maybe there's some number.
Oh my goodness! It sounds like you're about to say something really good, but unfortunately, you didn't respect the clock, and that's what's important here on the speed bag, sir. Now,
oh, never mind.
What would you say?
Got me.
Isn't Ngannou hurt? Didn't he come out and say something about he was hurt and that's why he couldn't do it?
He wanted the fight. He was
saying he wanted the fight.
Yeah.
All right, so Jay, I will start the last question off with you. Phil Davis knocked out Carl Albrechtsen and called out Bellator to make a light heavyweight tournament. Do you think that is something worth doing?
No, there's not enough depth in the division. Do we really need to see Davis versus Bader versus McGeary versus Nemkov again? Tournament should be special.
10 seconds. Beautiful there. So, Pat, you're up now. Please tell me, does a light heavyweight Grand Prix in Bellator make sense to you? Oh, he's gonna disrespect the clock while drinking.
That's not a legit question. No. That's it. No.
You know what? That is the finest use of the clock. I applaud you, sir. Jason, you are the last one to actually. Well, I'll go ahead and run through all these questions afterward. But this is your last chance here on the speed bag. Do you like the idea of a Bellator light heavyweight Grand Prix?
No, I don't like it. They had a Bellator heavyweight Grand Prix for a reason, and Bader went up because there is a lacking depth in his own division, so he was there.
All right. Well, nice little twist of the results there. Very, very good. So now it's my turn. to go ahead and do this. But I'm going to adjust this clock to give me 30 seconds to work because I'm going to answer all 3 questions back to back.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, I mean,
really unfair for a minute. I was like, damn.
I mean, but I can do what I want. I do what I want.
Whatever I do, I won't.
Yeah. All right. So, I will start this clock after reading the question. So, Anthony Pettis versus Donald Cerrone 2 getting. Should that be the fight to be put together next? No, I still believe that Donald Cerrone should be fighting Conor McGregor next. It makes the most sense because both men are coming off losses, and it would be exciting, very promotable, and would not harm the title picture at all. The reason why Greg Hardy got a matchup against Alexander Volkov is simply circumstances. He's the biggest name, the most controversy. They could sell it. Phil Davis, I think he's on to something. We don't care about the Bellator light heavyweight division. A Grand Prix might turn some eyeballs, so why not?
Oh man!
Goodness
30
gracious.
seconds. I saw it tick. I was ready to say something.
Yeah, actually, I was like, I was going to add one more point, but I'm like, nah. I respect the clock.
I think somebody's got to time you next time so you can't see the clock and you don't know where you're at because that's part of the fun.
That would be fun.
But that means I would not be in control, and that is not fun. All right. So, speaking of light heavyweights, they will be featured alongside the heavyweights for the final show of the PFL playoffs. Are you guys tuning in to watch this on Halloween night? I'll take that as a no.
I might get a little drunk, hand out some candy to kids, watch a little PFL for a minute or two. I don't know.
Yeah,
that
see,
sounds so wrong.
Well,
a little drunk, hand out candy to kids.
That's what you're supposed to do, man.
He's just not eating candy and handing out booze to kids.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you better not be handing out edibles to
kids. I do live in Texas. They might be all right with that, but
I'm just saying you can't say that sentence as a man in any other time of the year.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah.
If you do that on November 1st, you are a pervert.
Sorry, let me rephrase that.
I'm fucking up on November 1st.
I might throw candy randomly at kids as they walk by, so they don't come up to my door, and then just watch, PFL on in the background or something. I don't know. Depends.
I'm not really. I mean, life circumstances are preventing me from watching it live. Most likely, if all goes according to plan, I'll be moving that day. So probably not. But whatever. I'm stressed out of my mind. That's a long story that I'm not going to bore you guys with or bore the audience with. But anyway, I mean, it's a good question to ask though, because PFL has they love to put on events during days that their key demographic is probably doing other shit. Mm-hmm. Halloween, would you rather be, hanging out at a bar with the hot girl dressed like a sexy nurse, or do you want to watch, Magomed Kiramov fight Magomed Jones? I don't know. Like, that just doesn't seem like the same level of excitement to me.
Yeah, I mean, PFL does that. There are 6 5-round fights on New Year's Eve. This will be the second year they've done so. Last year, the fights ended at about 11:30, 11:45. So there's no time for love, Dr. Jones. It harkens back to a rant I made a couple weeks ago about One Championship, whereby it punishes the viewer for watching the sport and the media for covering it. I mean, don't get it twisted. I love the sport dearly. I'll follow. I knew what I was getting myself into when I signed up for it. But this isn't the kind of thing that can do them any favors. This kind of scheduling hurts the PFL playoffs when they're dying to get viewers. I know we've had many discussions in the past about PFL and their tactics, but something that hurts an organization that's trying to develop a following, the worst thing you can do is have an uneven schedule. And it's not every Thursday at 8:00 p.m. or whatever it should be. This is going to be the third playoff event for this season before they move on to the championships. The first one was on a Friday. The second was on a Saturday, and this third one will be on a Thursday. If I have to stop and figure it out, there's no way they're going to get a repeat audience to go, okay, wait, Friday show, then the Thursday show, but which one's going on? Oh, it's on Halloween. you can't put on a 20 something, was it 20 something million dollar tournament on the back of an audience that doesn't know when their events are, or they know when their events are, going, oh boy, I can't wait to spend Halloween night watching Alex Nicholson punch somebody and possibly say something offensive. Yay! I'm psyched.
I'm reminded of the WSOF back when they had the old name. Didn't they put on their first New Year's show? Wasn't it earlier in the day?
Yes,
and it actually had some decent ratings.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was about. I thought it was like. I remember 3 p.m. for a reason. Yeah, there were 3 title fights. You got it done with. The fights were fine. They did what they needed to do, and you were done by 5. Okay.
Right.
But PFL starts this weekend. What, at 7:30 prelims and whatever, and the main card starts at 9. I haven't seen the schedule off the top of my head, but we're done by midnight. The night's over. Anybody that has plans doesn't have plans if they're watching PFL this weekend.
All right, and then also the UFC, when they put on the Overeem and Brock Lesnar main event, that was on a Friday night because the next night was New Year's Eve, and that's the one night that, one holiday that you're just not going to compete with for the demographic of people that typically watch mixed martial arts. So, anything we want to add on this about PFL and the playoffs before we move on to discussing UFC 244 briefly before we shut it all down for the evening? Or morning, whenever you're watching this. All right, cool. Let's get this work. So, UFC 244 is finally upon us this weekend. Madison Square Garden will play host to the BMF title. There is a lot on this card. There's a very, very stacked card. So, fellas, I would like for you to give me one matchup that's really kind of tickling your fancy here. And I say one, Jay, I know you didn't study the whole card. Jason, I know you're doing the unknown series, so I know you're knee deep in studying undercard fighters right now. So I know you'll have a lot on this. And Pat, you're a knucklehead just like me, so I know you're about to get this work. So fellas, let's go ahead and discuss one fight on the card that we are really looking forward to outside of the main event. I will start with you, Jason.
Well, confession time. I'm working on the Unfamiliars for Saturday starting tomorrow. It's not procrastination, I swear. I'm actually working on a 10 most interesting facts for Masvidal. So I do plan to start on that. But I've got to go with the main card fight, Johnny Walker versus Corey Anderson. It's going to be a really interesting fight to see how he does against a really high-level grappler in the division. And then there's also the storyline that Corey Anderson has with Jones, and Johnny Walker just has a ton of hype. Of course, we have the now Portuguese channel for MMA on Point now, and Luis, or Coutinho as he's known, talks just all day about how massive Johnny Walker is in Brazil. So this is a massive fight for that region of the world right now. And I think there's a lot of pressure on it. There's a lot of feelings on it. And aside from the main card, I think it's probably my favorite fight, just period. Not just to highlight it, not just to say something. Aside from the co-main, I think it's more interesting than the co-main. So personally for me, that's the big one.
All right. Jay, what about you?
All right. We'll keep this brief, well, relatively. My fight of the night is Hurricane Shane Burgos taking on Mr. Finland, Makwan Amirkhani. I think that's one of those fights where it will probably take place everywhere. It'll take place in every stage of the fight. We're going to get that. And I like that, to be able to see exactly how talented a fighter is at all of the facets of the game. They're going to clinch up. Someone's going to get taken down. Shane Burgos likes the brawl. You saw what he did with Cub Swanson a couple months ago. So that has a really fun fight written all over it. I have a couple quick thoughts about the main event that I'm going to extol because that's what happens. The BMF title, I believe, is not going to end at the end of the night. I believe this is not the end for this nonsense gimmick belt. But it's a little telling that it's fight week and we still have not seen the silly thing yet that costs $50,000+ to make. If it's come out today, I have not seen it. But something about this main event I'm really curious about. The UFC has a weird way of promoting fighters. They're, generally speaking, they're against individuality for the most part when it comes to the presentation. Reebok deal obviously excluded a lot of their gear and apparel. The way they appear when it's fight night, it's pretty much down to business. Israel Adesanya had his very interesting and entertaining walkout that he had to fight to allow that to happen before he fought Robert Whittaker in Australia. But when it comes to fighters that sell themselves on the microphone, they're vocal, they have one-liners, they can push those fighters through the roof. It's all about being good enough on the microphone, or at least being able to have the clever thing to say. Look at the fighters, some of the fighters they hyped in the past. Askren, they did what they could to deal with him because, he had his mic skills. Chael Sonnen had more title fights than probably necessary because of the way he did it. Tito Ortiz and his silly words that fell out of his face hole, that afforded him opportunities later on down the line when he was starting to lose and only beating Ken Shamrock. Winning can be second best when depending on how a fighter presents him or herself. It's no surprise to think of all the biggest fighters the UFC has ever had have, generally speaking, besides, George St. Pierre, but he even had a couple little moments, are the guys or girls on the microphone. So this main event, we have two fighters that have looked decently, but if we look at their, if you pull up their Fight Finder listings, you look at their resumes, they're not a win away from a title fight. They're a win away from they have a title fight now. But I don't know, this title situation, it's a money fight. It's going to be funny. It might be an interesting fight, but does it at the end of the day, I guess I'll ask you guys after all of this I've said, does this fight really matter in the scheme of things, in the divisional sense or implicational?
No. I mean, for Masvidal, maybe, because at least Masvidal is on a run that would. I mean, before this BMF thing even became a discussion, we were talking about Masvidal in the title picture.
Yep.
After what he did to Ben Askren and after what he did to Darren Till.
Mm-hmm.
So that was something that came up. And if the fight with Leon Edwards took place, which a lot of people were pushing for, that would have definitely had title implications. So I'm for Nate Diaz, no, he's just a name that is entertaining, and you can throw him in a spot and people will pay money to see him. So, I just hope this BMF thing doesn't last very long. What I'm hoping, actually, and I think I've said this on this show before. If not, then I've said it on the trenches maybe. But I'm hoping that the BMF belt, the winner of the BMF belt, becomes the number one contender. So that way they're going to fight the champion, and then this whole thing goes away. Because if it runs separately, this will become they're already trying to put BMF rankings in place.
Yes.
If you check Fight Pass, they already have a BMF playlist.
Tony Ferguson, I saw that.
Yeah, and Gaethje on it. Like they are already making moves to the and they've got the term trademark and everything. They are making moves on this. So if this is a number one contender fight, the winner of this will most likely lose to Kamaru Usman or Colby Covington.
Yes.
And then the champion will be the BMF, and all will be right in the world.
So you're saying the lineal BMF champion will be unified with the actual champion?
Yes, and then we never got to see The Rock present a belt ever again.
Oh my goodness!
Nothing against The Rock. I think The Rock
really
is
going to
fantastic.
happen, isn't it? It's really going to happen. They're really going to do this.
It's really going to happen. Into that, I'll take another swig. So,
wish this wasn't water.
So, did I give my pick for sleeper fight?
You can now.
I can now. Did I miss anyone else? You okay?
Me, it's par for the course. Just go ahead.
You don't count, Pat. But Pat, tell me what fight's standing out to you on this?
I'm actually really looking forward, and I'm hoping, maybe this is just the fan of me, I'm really hoping that Vicente Luque and Wonder Boy deliver a great fight. Luque's been on a tear. I mean, if he hasn't been knocking people out or submitting them, he's having a fight of the night with Mike Perry. I'm hoping that brings back old Wonder Boy, who on the way, knows. I'm hoping that brings back old Wonder Boy, who on his way to the title run had some crazy knockouts, and it gets into a bit of a firefight. I think that'd be great. So that I bet it will be more entertaining than people are expecting, even though Wonder Boy's been kind of flat. But I think it'll be great. It'll be a good fight.
I dig it.
Yeah, that's man, this card is crazy stacked. Jason, looked like you were about to add something.
Hi. Oh, don't say it that high pitched. So I did want to kind of push back on the whole BMF kind of concept here of where that leads. I do think, and I'll give a shout out to Mix Molly Whoppery, who's also another YouTuber who did a video called Grand Theft Hype. And he was talking about how Masvidal, if you really think of it, he didn't hit it big after the Darren Till win. He did hit it a lot bigger than he was, but it was that Askren win, which really took all that momentum that Askren had and just pushed him in that direction. And so if Jorge loses, he's no longer a contender for the real belt, straight up. It just wrecks that. If Nate does have that, I think he rides that momentum on top of what he already has, which is just, kind of insane. And we could see, there could be an unintended consequence where we actually see this guy being put up for a title shot before, I don't know. I mean, we could name any one of these guys that deserves it, like a Leon Edwards, probably. I mean, definitely before Nate Diaz would. So I do think that this actually could have real title implications. If they do start making these actual rankings and shit just really goes off the rails, then it's like a good idea that got corporatized and now it has no semblance of what it used to be, and you're just really annoyed with it. But
so you're saying like if Buffalo Wild Wings made a hot sauce and a wing sauce devoted to a BMF flavor, that would corporatize it, right?
Almost like if they did that and released it today. I don't know if they released it today, but that's when I saw the ad. But yeah, exactly like that.
So maybe in honor of Colby Covington fighting Usman, they'll release like new mayonnaise sandwiches or something. It's just a thought.
They have old mayonnaise sandwiches. That's a thing.
Maybe they just give them vanilla ice cream cones and can say, "You guys are the boring title now." Here.
All right, so I'll go ahead and drop the fight that I'm looking for. I mean, seriously, this entire card is great. I mean, the very first fight of the night between Julio Arce and Hakeem Dawodu just sounds fantastic. But what's jumping off at the page of me right now, Kevin Lee versus Gregor Gillespie. And this is going to answer so many questions. First of all, Gregor Gillespie is the guy that a lot of people are talking about might be giving Khabib some work in a couple of years. And if he's able to get past Kevin Lee, that's going to say a whole lot about what he can do in the future at lightweight. Also for Kevin Lee, this will be his first time stepping out in the cage as a student of Faraz Sahabi at TriStar. And I'm very curious as to see what Kevin Lee is going to look like with this level of coaching behind him. Things have not been quite the same for him coaching wise since Sean Tompkins passed. So I do believe that Kevin Lee is definitely needed this sort of guidance and wanted to see what he looks like at 155 now that he's had a brief run at welterweight. So that's damn, that's a good fight. That is a damn good fight. But this card is filled with fantastic fights, and quite frankly, you could pick any one of these, and it'll be a good day at the office. So, fellas, before we wrap things up, we're going to drop our buried treasure, and that is a story that should be getting more attention. You're surprised it's not getting more attention, or you just, whatever. It just stands out to you, but doesn't seem to be standing out to the rest of the world. So, I'll start with you, Pat. What is your buried treasure for the week?
So my buried treasure is that LFA has officially announced. I'd seen some fighters talking about it, but I hadn't seen anything official from the promotion. And they obviously had the Access TV deal removed and had to cancel some events. But now they have officially announced that they've got LFA 78 and 79 coming November 15th and 22nd. And it's not getting any coverage, but I think it's hugely important just because of the ramifications on the regional scene and how many LFA. If you don't realize how important LFA is to the UFC, go to LFA's Twitter every single fight event and just watch. They're like, hey, we wish these 15 fighters good luck. In like every time. I've never seen them not have at least, I think, 8 guys that are fighting in the UFC. They're massively important. So that's my big.
All right. Jason, share with us your buried treasure for the week, sir.
Yeah, I love the way you said that. It's like I want everyone to drop their treasure. It's just like it sounds like everyone's just popping a squat on this podcast. But yeah, so I think one of the big things. So obviously we've talked about it for a major amount of time on this podcast specifically. All this USADA stuff, all this BMF title stuff. But on Friday, just a couple hours before all that happened, Randy Couture had a freaking heart attack. And the crazy thing is that, like, he tried to, I guess he didn't understand what was happening. So he just kind of thought he was having an off day. And from my understanding, I might have the sequence of events wrong, but he actually tried to go home and kind of sleep it off. And then he went back to the gym and tried to like roll it out.
Yeah, he had one of those rollers.
Yeah, it's just a muscle cramp. That's all it is. And then he just walked to the hospital, checked himself in, having a heart attack, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you were about to die, dude." And apparently, what is it that he had said? Let me read the quote. "I'm one of those people that has crazy thick blood and nominally high bad cholesterol. Unfortunately, those two factors combine to create a nice clot in my diagonal artery." So there you go. And he was wearing a shirt that said, "I am unbreakable, motherfucker," after he got out of the hospital. So, I mean, there's a pretty big win. You, I guess, kind of beat death on that day.
Yeah.
Nobody knew about it though, because it happens on the BMF stuff. So.
Yeah, and walked home from the hospital afterward too.
Walked
right out on his own accord. Yeah.
Yeah. What a maniac. All right, so Jay, share with us your buried treasure for the week, please.
Well, I'd like to also mention. I would say it's about -105, -110 odds that Randy will be on the broadcast on Thursday because he's a PFL commentator. I would expect. Now he was in LA, so the travel may be difficult. He probably can't fly after having heart surgery. It wasn't open heart surgery; it was a stent, so they put it in differently. But he might be in Vegas in a couple days calling the fights because that's Randy Couture. Let's stay in the hospital for a little while because that's always positive and uplifting. Headliner, as we mentioned in the speed bag round, Greg Hardy's stepping up to fight Alexander Volkov. Now he's doing so because Junior Dos Santos, the former headliner, almost lost his leg last week. He had a massive. Well, he was working out and he started feeling some pain in his leg. So he put some ice on it, took an anti-inflammatory. Okay, whatever. And so the next day he's like, yeah, I probably should go to the hospital. And his coaches are like, yeah, you probably should. And it was a massive infection, massive infection that was also hit by, was it MRSA? It was either staph or so. It was some sort of just unbelievable infection, such that the hole in his leg, we're going to get graphic for a second, was about the size of a golf ball. In his shin, to help treat and drain the infection in his leg. He must have swollen up like a balloon. And so he's expecting to make a full recovery. But if he hadn't gotten it treated in time, that leg would not have been there anymore. So, hey, go to the hospital when you feel messed up, guys, because it could be real bad.
So what you're saying is JDS could have fought at middleweight.
Yeah, man.
All right.
Head kicks would have been hard for him, though. The spinning hot heel kick.
All right. So my buried treasure for the week is just the once again this crossover bug that seems to hit boxing and MMA, as both Carissa Shields and Tyson Fury have made their intentions to fight MMA known. Not sure how serious they are. I mean, both have flirted with this idea quite a lot in the past. And Dana White, Scott Coker, Chatru Sichachong, pretty much any major promoter you can think of would be more than happy to sign them up. So not sure if that's going to amount to anything, but with all the craziness going on, didn't really get as much attention as it probably otherwise would have. So before we conclude, just one last note, and that is to remind you once again, if you know anything, if you hear anything, if you have seen Anaya Blanchard, the stepdaughter of UFC heavyweight Walt Harris, please contact the authorities. You can call the Auburn police at 334-501-3140. Again, that number is 334-501-3140. So let's bring this young lady home safe. So, Jason, let the good people know where they can find you on social media, sir.
Yeah, don't look up MMA on Point on Twitter because that's like a 7-year-old inactive account for someone who goes by the name of Mama Duru. And I guess that was her abbreviation for Mama on Point. So it's On Point MMA if you want to look for our official account there. And I'm, of course, Jason the Heart. And then you can find us on YouTube under MMA on Point. But let me also shout out our film channel that does film and TV. We just did a thing about The Thing. Wow, that's great wording. That's Screen on Point, and so you can find us under that. So we're almost at 10,000 subscribers for that. So
that Terminator video was dope, by the way. So yeah,
I know his mom got tickets.
Definitely enjoyed that.
Shout out back to Kevin Lee there. I don't know why it just fit. I know his mom got tickets.
Don't you be talking about
hey,
mama.
If you were in LA, I would jump up and punch you for that. So
yeah, you would. All right, Kiesa, chill out.
All right, Pat. Now, this time I'm not going to forget to give you an outro and let you tell everyone where they can find you.
They can find me at AllDayOJ on Twitter. That's ALLDAYAUGER, spelled like Auger, but it's pronounced OJ. You can also find me on Instagram, although I'm not on there a lot. Although when I cover live events, I post stuff there, but otherwise mostly stick to Twitter. And then you can find me at thebodylock and Sherdog.com, of course. I mean, 2 main sites doing what I do, talking about business. If you like money, come read my stuff. Mostly.
Business is a booming. All right. So, all right. And Jay, where can the folks find you?
Well, if things go accordingly, you can find me right down here. And you can also look me up on Sherdog.com. If you drop down at the little features tab, I'm right there on the list. I'm writing everything in the sport from betting odds to play-by-play. I'll be on the play-by-play for UFC 244, so that's going to be an adventure. Statistics pieces, anything else in the sport, pretty much, there's somewhere I'm involved. So I'm everywhere you need me to be.
All right, cool. So I'm Ant Walker. Of course, you can find me on the Walkout Network because that's what you're watching right now. You can also find my work on Sherdog.com. You can find some work on MMA on Point. I haven't been a presence as of late, but we'll work all that out. We'll work it out. But anyway, yeah, Good, Bad, and the Ugly, Ask Ant, The Trenches, and something else. I forgot, whatever. Just follow my Twitter and you'll find what else I do. So, oh yeah, Blunt Force Trauma. Yes. New episode with Leslie Smith just dropped a few days back. So check that out. Pretty good interview. Jordan Colbert went in great depth about CBD and how she uses marijuana in training and whatnot. So very interesting stuff there. Leslie Smith is always a great interview. But anyway, you know what you got to do. You got to stay beautiful. You got to stay positive. And through it all, you got to stay sexy. I will see you when I see you. Peace. All right, and we are going to